The massive door slid open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. The grinding of ancient machinery echoed across the dead landscape as the entrance revealed itself meter by meter. Do-hyun and his team stood frozen, watching the impossible happen before their eyes. What just occurred? Borak asked, his translator struggling to convey his confusion. What did you say, Mirai? Mirai stared at her hands, then at the opening door. I spoke in Korean. I was just translating one of the warning texts. I didn't think it would actually do anything. But it did, Hyejin said softly. She stepped closer to Mirai, her medical scanner automatically checking her colleague's vital signs. The door responded to your voice specifically. Do-hyun approached the threshold carefully. His suit lights pierced the darkness inside, revealing a smooth corridor that stretched deep into the mountain. The walls were made of the same perfect metal as the door, completely unmarked by time. Mirai, try speaking again, he ordered. In Korean, Mirai hesitated, then spoke clearly. Hello? Can you hear me? The lights inside the corridor flared to life. Hundreds of panels along the walls and ceiling began glowing with that same soft blue color. The illumination revealed a passage that descended at a gentle angle, disappearing into the depths. The voice returned, speaking Korean with perfect clarity. Language pattern confirmed. Updating interface protocols. Welcome to Vault 47. You are the first to arrive. Please proceed to the central chamber. It's an artificial intelligence, Jinwoo said, his engineer's mind already analyzing the technology. And it's responding only to Korean. Why would a precursor facility recognize an Earth language? No one had an answer. Do-hyun made the decision quickly. We're going in. Stay together and keep your recorders active. Document everything. They entered the vault as a group, walking down the corridor with careful steps. The door remained open behind them, but no one felt particularly comfortable about that. The air inside was stale but breathable according to their sensors. The temperature was controlled, maintained at exactly 20 degrees Celsius. The corridor was longer than it appeared from outside. They walked for 10 minutes, descending steadily into the mountain. The walls were covered with panels that displayed flowing text in dozens of languages. Most were unknown, but occasionally Do-hyun spotted Korean characters mixed among the alien scripts. This doesn't make sense, Mirai said as they walked. She was recording everything with her scanner. Korean is a relatively young language in galactic terms. Earth only joined the coalition 300 years ago. The precursors disappeared 10,000 years ago. How could they possibly know Korean? Perhaps they didn't, Hyejin suggested. Perhaps the vault is translating somehow, reading your genetic pattern and adapting to your language. That would require technology far beyond anything we've encountered, Borak said. Even for the precursors, that seems extreme. They reached the end of the corridor and emerged into a chamber so vast that their suit lights couldn't reach the far walls. Do-hyun's breath caught in his throat. The space was enormous, easily the size of a small city. But what filled him with awe wasn't the size. It was what the chamber contained. Rows upon rows of cylindrical pods stretched into the darkness. Each pod was about 2 meters tall, made of transparent material that glowed faintly. And inside each pod, perfectly preserved, was a human being. By the void, Jinwoo whispered. There are thousands of them. Tens of thousands, Mirai corrected, her voice shaking. Maybe hundreds of thousands. I can't see where they end. Hyejin rushed to the nearest pod, her medical scanner active. They're alive. In stasis, but alive. All vital signs are stable. These people are being kept in perfect suspended animation. Do-hyun moved through the rows, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Every pod contained a human. Men, women, different ages, different appearances. All of them sleeping peacefully, unaware that 10,000 years had passed. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. The glowing blue projection formed into a humanoid shape, featureless but clearly meant to represent a person. When it spoke, the voice was the same one from the door, speaking Korean. I am Caretaker Protocol 7, the projection announced. I have maintained this facility for 9,743 years, awaiting the return of humanity. Your arrival fulfills the primary directive. The return of humanity? Do-hyun stepped forward. What do you mean? Who are these people? They are the last generation, Caretaker said. Preserved by the first wave during the final days of the Great Project. When the decision was made to collapse everything, selected individuals were placed in the vaults for safekeeping. Mirai's scientific mind was racing. You're saying these people are from before the collapse? They're 10,000 years old? Correct. This vault contains 732,000 individuals, all placed in stasis on the final day. They represent the genetic and cultural diversity of humanity as it existed during the height of the first wave civilization. First wave? Borak asked. What is first wave? Caretaker's projection turned to face the insectoid officer. Adjusting for translation, first wave refers to humanity's original expansion into the stars. The civilization you know as the precursors. Silence filled the chamber. The statement was so enormous, so impossible, that no one could respond immediately. Do-hyun felt his worldview cracking and reforming around this new information. That's impossible, he finally said. The precursors were incredibly advanced. They built technology we still can't understand. They shaped planets and moved stars. We're new to the galaxy. We've only had space travel for 500 years. You are new to this galaxy in your current form, Caretaker agreed. But humanity is ancient. The first wave began 6 million years ago when humans first left Earth. They spread across this galaxy and beyond, building the civilization you now call precursor. At their height, they controlled 40,000 star systems and had evolved far beyond their biological origins. Hyejin sat down heavily on the ground, her legs suddenly weak. We're the precursors? Humans built all of this. Yes, and then they destroyed it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Do-hyun moved closer to the holographic projection. Why? Why would they destroy their own civilization? Because of what was coming, Caretaker said. The first wave discovered an entity approaching from beyond this galaxy. They called it the Silence. It was something that existed outside normal space and time, and it consumed civilizations not by destroying them, but by erasing them from causality itself. Species touched by the Silence would simply cease to have ever existed. Mirai stood among the stasis pods, her hand resting on one. How do you fight something like that? You cannot fight it, Caretaker replied. The first wave tried. They threw their entire technological might against the Silence and failed. Every weapon, every strategy, every defense was useless. The Silence could not be stopped or reasoned with. It could only be avoided. The collapse, Do-hyun said, understanding dawning. It wasn't an attack or an accident. It was deliberate. Correct. The first wave made the ultimate sacrifice. They collapsed their own civilization, destroyed their own worlds, and scattered humanity's genetic legacy across the galaxy in sealed vaults. The destruction would hide the vaults from the Silence. The entity would find nothing but ruins and move on to other galaxies. Humanity would survive in these vaults, sleeping until the Silence had passed. Jinwoo was examining the nearest pods with his engineering scanner. How many vaults are there? 144 vaults were created. Each contains between 500,000 and 1 million individuals. Together they hold the complete genetic, cultural, and technological knowledge of the first wave. They were meant to be humanity's last seed, planted in darkness waiting to bloom again when it was safe. And now they're waking up? Hyejin asked. No, Caretaker said, and there was something like sadness in the artificial voice. You have triggered the wake protocol by opening this vault. The signal has gone out to all other vaults. They will begin opening. But there is a problem. What problem? Do-hyun demanded. The Silence did not leave this galaxy. It went dormant, waiting in the spaces between dimensions. And according to my sensors, it has begun to move again. The calculations were precise. The Silence would return in approximately 10,000 years. The holographic figure turned to face them all. That time is now. By opening this vault, you may have saved humanity, or you may have doomed the galaxy. The revelation hung over them like a storm cloud. Do-hyun stared at the endless rows of stasis pods, each containing a human who had gone to sleep when his species ruled the galaxy. Now they would wake to find themselves in a universe that had forgotten them. Show us everything, Do-hyun said to Caretaker. We need to understand what we're dealing with. The holographic projection expanded, filling the air above them with images and data streams. Caretaker's voice took on a tone that might have been eagerness if artificial intelligences could feel such things. The first wave began on Earth 6 million years ago. Humanity developed faster than light travel and spread outward into the galaxy. At first, the expansion was slow, but humans adapted to each new world, modified themselves, improved their technology. Within 2 million years, they had settled 10,000 systems. The hologram showed humanity spread across the galaxy like a growing stain of light. Planets bloomed with civilization. Massive structures appeared in space, so large they dwarfed entire solar systems. The first wave achieved what you now call technological singularity. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level. They built artificial planets. They moved stars to better positions. They extended their lifespans indefinitely and began to transcend physical form entirely. Some humans uploaded their consciousness into vast computer networks. Others merged with artificial intelligence to become something new. Mireille watched the display with tears in her eyes. We did all that. Humans created the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Yes, but success brought complacency. The first wave became focused on internal development, on achieving higher states of existence. They stopped paying attention to the wider universe. That was their mistake. The holographic display changed, showing something that made Do-hyun's stomach turn. It was a region of space that looked wrong somehow. Stars were there, then they weren't. Entire sections of the galaxy flickered like a faulty light. The silence emerged from another dimension approximately 12,000 years ago. The first wave's deep space sensors detected it at the galactic rim. At first, they thought it was a natural phenomenon. But as they studied it, they realized the truth. The silence was alive in a way. It fed on civilizations. How does something feed on a civilization? Hyejin asked. By erasing it from existence, not just destroying it, but removing it from the timeline itself. Imagine if your species suddenly never existed. No history, no records, no evidence you were ever here. That is what the silence does. It reaches backward through time and removes species from causality. Borok's antennae trembled with fear. That is impossible. Even the precursors, even the first wave, could not manipulate time that way. Correct. Which is why they could not fight it. The first wave tried everything. They built weapons that could shatter planets. They created defense shields that bent space itself. They even attempted to fold reality around their worlds to hide from the silence. Nothing worked. In the end, they watched as 3 of their major colonies simply ceased to exist. Billions of humans gone, and no one except the protected observers remembered they had ever lived. The chamber felt colder despite the controlled temperature. Do-hyun looked at his crew and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. They had stumbled into something far larger and more terrifying than they could have imagined. The first wave's greatest minds gathered for a final council. Caretaker continued. They debated for months. Some wanted to flee to other galaxies. Others wanted to fight to the last. But one group had a different idea. They proposed Operation Last Seed. The hologram shifted again, showing vast construction projects. Doors like the one they had entered were built on hundreds of worlds. Millions of humans lined up to enter the vaults. The plan was radical. The first wave would deliberately destroy itself. They would collapse their own civilization, reduce their greatest works to ruins, and hide humanity's survivors in sealed vaults. The destruction would satisfy the silence. It would find ruins and move on, following its normal pattern of consuming and then seeking new prey. But why hide in vaults? Jinwoo asked. Why not just flee and start over elsewhere? Because the silence tracks genetic signatures and technological patterns. If humans had simply fled, it would have followed. The vaults were designed to hide both. Their walls are made of materials that exist slightly out of phase with normal space. To outside observers, including the silence, they appear to be simple geological formations. And the humans inside are in such deep stasis that they register as completely non-living. No biological signals, no brain activity, nothing to detect. Mireille moved closer to one of the pods, looking at the sleeping woman inside. So they went to sleep, hoping to wake up after the danger passed. Exactly. The vaults were programmed to remain sealed for 10,000 years, the calculated time for the silence to move on to other galaxies. Each vault contains not just people, but the complete knowledge of the first wave. Every scientific discovery, every work of art, every bit of cultural heritage was preserved. The goal was that when humans woke, they could rebuild everything that was lost. But something went wrong, Do-hyun said. You said by opening the vault we might have doomed the galaxy. Why? Caretaker's projection dimmed slightly. Because the silence never left. The first wave's calculations were correct about the 10,000-year timeline. But they assumed the silence would continue moving, consuming galaxy after galaxy in a predictable pattern. Instead, it went dormant. My sensors indicate it has been waiting in the spaces between dimensions, and it has begun to stir. Your opening of this vault triggered the recall signal. All 144 vaults are now beginning their wake cycles. Millions of humans will emerge from stasis over the next weeks. And that will draw the Silence's attention, Yejin said quietly. Potentially, yes. If humanity awakens and begins rebuilding, it will create exactly the kind of genetic and technological signatures that the Silence hunts. The vaults were meant to hide you, but now you are being revealed. Do-hyun felt the weight of command pressing down on him. They had made first contact with the greatest archaeological discovery in history, and in doing so, they might have triggered a galactic catastrophe. He looked at his crew, seeing the same calculation playing out in their eyes. "Is there any way to fight it?" he asked. "The first wave was incredibly advanced, but we have 10,000 years of additional research. The Coalition has technologies they never dreamed of. Can we use that?" "The first wave left weapons in the vaults," Caretaker said. "Not conventional weapons. These are tools designed specifically to combat entities that exist outside normal space-time, but they require human operators." Jinwoo perked up at that. "Human specifically? Why?" "Because the weapons work on principles that defy logic. They require intuition, creativity, and a particular kind of stubbornness that the first wave discovered was unique to baseline humanity. As the first wave evolved and transcended their biological origins, they lost these traits. They became too logical, too rational. That is why they failed to fight the Silence effectively. But humans in their basic form, humans like you, possess the mental flexibility and irrational determination needed to operate the weapons." Mirai laughed bitterly. "So the first wave created all this incredible technology and became like gods. But in doing so, they lost the one thing that could have saved them, the ability to be stubborn and stupid and refuse to accept defeat." "That is an oversimplification, but essentially correct," Caretaker agreed. "The first wave recognized this flaw too late. That is why they preserved baseline humans in the vaults. You are not just survivors. You are weapons. Your minds work in ways that can fight the Silence because you have not evolved beyond the capacity for hope against impossible odds." Do-hyun walked through the rows of pods, thinking hard. Around him slept hundreds of thousands of people who would wake to a universe they didn't know. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, an entity that devoured civilizations was beginning to move again. "Show me the weapons," he said finally, "and show me how to wake these people up safely. If we're going to face this, we need everyone." Caretaker's projection brightened. "Follow me. The weapons vault is on the lower level. But Captain Do-hyun, you should know something else." "What?" "The people in these pods are not ordinary humans. The first wave selected them carefully. Each person here was enhanced, trained, and prepared for the specific purpose of surviving and fighting. They have knowledge implanted in their genetic memory. They have been modified to learn faster, heal quicker, and adapt better than standard humans. When they wake, they will remember their purpose." The holographic figure turned to face them all. "The first wave did not just preserve humanity. They weaponized it. These are not refugees waiting to be saved. They are soldiers waiting to be deployed, and you have just given the order to deploy them." The news spread through the Galactic Coalition like wildfire. Within hours of Do-hyun's report, every major government knew the truth. The precursors were humans. The greatest civilization in galactic history had been humanity's first wave, and now millions of them were waking from 10,000-year sleep. The political response was immediate and chaotic. On the Coalition capital world of Vexar Prime, emergency sessions were called. Representatives from 200 species gathered to debate what this revelation meant. Some saw opportunity, access to precursor technology that had been locked away for millennia. Others saw threat, millions of enhanced humans with advanced weapons waking up across the galaxy. Do-hyun watched the debates through holographic transmission from the vault. He stood in a command center that Suho's people had activated, surrounded by displays showing Coalition space. Red markers indicated where the Silence had been detected. The markers were spreading. "They're arguing while the galaxy burns," Suho said beside him. The commander had fully recovered from his long sleep, and now coordinated with other vault commanders through quantum communication networks. Typical of governments, they focus on politics instead of survival. "Can you blame them?" Do-hyun asked. From their perspective, an army of enhanced humans just appeared without warning. Some species have been nervous about human expansion for centuries. Now they learned that humans once ruled the entire galaxy, and potentially could again. "We don't want to rule anything," Suho said tiredly. "We want to stop the silence. That's our only purpose." But the political situation continued to deteriorate. Anti-human factions began organizing protests on several worlds. They demanded that the vaults be sealed again or destroyed. Some extremist groups even launched attacks on known vault locations, trying to prevent more humans from waking. The pro-human factions responded with equal vigor. They argued that humanity's return was the galaxy's only hope against the silence. They pointed to the advanced weapons coming online, and the desperate need for people trained to use them. In the middle of the chaos, the death count began. The silence reached the Outer Rim colonies 3 days after the vaults opened. The first world to fall was a mining colony on the edge of Coalition space. 10,000 people lived there, mostly workers from various species. The Coalition received one distress signal, then nothing. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found the planet empty. The buildings were still there, the equipment still running, but the people were gone. More disturbing, there were no records of the colony ever being populated. Computer systems showed it as an automated facility. Personal effects in the living quarters had no names attached. It was as if 10,000 people had simply never existed. The same pattern repeated at colony after colony. The silence moved through populated worlds like a wave, erasing populations from existence. The Coalition military tried to evacuate ahead of it, but evacuees began disappearing during transport. Ships would arrive at safe ports with empty passenger holds and crew members who didn't remember ever picking up refugees. "We're losing this fight before it even begins," said Yunji, a strategic analyst who had woken from the third vault to open. She stood beside Dohyun in the command center, studying the spreading disaster. "The silence is moving faster than the first wave records suggested. It's adapted, grown stronger during its dormant period." Dohyun clenched his fists in frustration. "Where are our deployments? We have the weapons, we have trained people. Why aren't we using them?" "Politics," Suho said bitterly. He pointed to one of the displays showing Coalition debates. "Half the governments won't let us deploy causality anchors on their worlds. They're afraid of what giving humans that much control might mean. They'd rather face the silence than accept our help." "That's insane." "That's fear," Yunji corrected. "Fear makes people irrational. They see human weapons protecting their worlds, and they imagine those same weapons being used to conquer their worlds later. Some species have very long memories of conflict with Earth during the early colonization periods." Mirai entered the command center with Heejin close behind. Both looked exhausted. They had been working with Vault medical teams to accelerate the revival process. "We've woken 2 million people across all vaults," Mirai reported, "but we're facing resistance at 30% of locations. Local governments are blocking full activation. Some vaults are under active siege by anti-human forces. Humans attacking humans." Dohyun felt sick, not just humans, Coalition species who fear what we represent, and some humans who believe the awakened ones are too dangerous, too different from modern humanity. Mirai's expression was haunted. "I spoke with protesters at Vault 12. They said the first wave destroyed their own civilization once. What's to stop them from doing it again?" Suho brought up a tactical display. "We have causality anchors deployed around 40 worlds. That's nowhere near enough. We need at least 500 anchor points to create an effective defensive grid. At our current rate, we won't reach that number before the silence overwhelms the outer sectors. So we're losing," Dohyun said quietly. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Around them, the command center continued functioning. People worked at stations, managing communications, coordinating resources. But everyone knew the truth. They were not moving fast enough. A communication came in from Coalition Command. The image showed Admiral Vexian, a 4-armed aquatic species who commanded the Coalition Defense Fleet. His translator conveyed frustration in his gurgling voice. "Captain Dohyun, we need authorization to deploy emergency measures. The Council is deadlocked. Half want to accept full Vault deployment. Half want to limit human involvement. While they debate, we're losing worlds. You're the one who opened the first Vault. You have authority over Vault protocols. Make the decision they can't." Dohyun felt every eye in the command center turn to him. The weight of it was crushing. One decision could save billions or start a civil war in the middle of an apocalypse. "What exactly are you asking me to authorize?" he asked carefully. "Full activation of all vaults. immediate deployment of all available weapons, and granting Vault forces independent operational authority to defend worlds whether local governments approve or not. That's basically martial law enforced by an ancient human army. Yunji said quietly. Yes, Admiral Vexen agreed, which is why the Council can't agree. But Captain, the silence doesn't care about our politics. In 2 more days it will reach worlds with populations in the billions. We don't have time for perfect solutions. We need effective ones. Do-hyun looked at Suho. If I give you full authority, what will you do? Save as many as we can, Suho answered simply. Deploy anchors to high-population worlds immediately. Establish memory forge networks to restore what the silence erases. Fight it with everything we have. Some governments will hate us. Some will see us as conquerors, but they'll be alive to hate us. And after? Do-hyun pressed. After the silence is gone or defeated or driven back. What happens to millions of enhanced humans with advanced weapons scattered across the galaxy? Suho met his gaze steadily. That's a question for after we survive. First we live. Then we figure out how to live together. Hyejin spoke up.
Captain, I've been studying the first wave historical records.
You know what their biggest regret was? That they became so advanced, so removed from other species that they couldn't work together anymore. They faced the silence alone because they had evolved past the point of cooperation. That isolation is what killed them. If we repeat that mistake, if humans act independently again, if we put power above partnership, we'll fail just like they did. So what's your recommendation? Do-hyun asked. Create a joint command structure. Vault forces under coalition oversight. We deploy the weapons, but we answer to a council that includes all species. Yes, it will be slower than independent action. Yes, some worlds will fall while we debate. But if we want to build something lasting, something that can face future threats, we need to show we're trustworthy now. Yunji nodded agreement. The first wave fell because they forgot how to work with others. The second wave, us, needs to remember that lesson. Do-hyun thought about the sleeping people in the vaults, the scared protesters outside, the spreading threat of the silence. Every option had terrible costs. Acting independently would save more lives in the short term but might fracture the galaxy. Acting through proper channels would maintain trust but cost lives. There's another factor, Mirai said quietly. The vault weapons require belief to function. Absolute conviction. If the operators don't believe in what they're doing, if they're forcing help on people who don't want it, will the weapons work as well? Suho frowned. She's right. Causality anchors work on certainty. If we're protecting people who hate us, who reject our help, that creates doubt. Doubt weakens the anchors. So we need willing cooperation, Do-hyun said slowly. Not just for politics, but for practical effectiveness. Which brings us back to the choice, Admiral Vexen said through the communication channel. Force deployment and potentially weaken your own weapons. Or wait for consensus and lose more worlds. Captain, you need to decide now. Do-hyun closed his eyes. He thought about his crew, about the people waking from 10,000 years sleep, about the billions threatened by the silence. Caretaker led them deeper into the vault complex. The corridors wound downward through layers of technology that made even Jinwoo's experienced eyes widen with amazement. The walls were not just metal. They seemed to shift and flow, responding to their presence. Holographic displays appeared and disappeared, showing information in dozens of languages. They descended for 20 minutes before reaching another massive chamber. This one was different from the stasis level. Instead of pods, it contained rows of pedestals, each holding objects that glowed with internal light. Some were weapons that looked almost conventional, rifles and pistols with elegant designs. Others were strange geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. The first wave called this the Arsenal of Last Resort, Caretaker explained. These weapons were designed during the final years before the collapse. They represent humanity's desperate attempt to fight an enemy that should not be possible to fight. Do-hyun approached the nearest pedestal. On it sat what looked like a simple sphere made of crystalline material. It pulsed with a soft red light that seemed to come from another dimension. What does this one do? He asked. That is a causality anchor. When activated, it creates a localized field where the timeline becomes fixed and unchangeable. Within the field, nothing can be erased from existence because the anchor insists that it exists. The silence cannot operate in areas protected by causality anchors. That sounds perfect, Hyejin said. Why didn't the first wave just cover their worlds with these anchors? Because they require constant human attention to function. The anchor doesn't work through power or programming. It works through belief. A human operator must hold the absolute conviction that the protected area exists, has existed, and will continue to exist. The first wave had evolved beyond such irrational certainty. Their logical minds could not sustain the required faith. Mireille picked up another device, a rod covered in symbols that shifted under her fingers. And this one? A memory forge. It can implant experiences and memories into reality retroactively. If the silence tries to erase something, the memory forge can restore it by creating evidence that it always existed. But again, it requires human intuition to operate. You must know what to restore and believe strongly enough that it was real. Jinwoo was examining the weapons with his engineer's eye. These aren't weapons in the traditional sense. They're more like tools for enforcing reality itself. You're fighting an enemy that changes what is real, so you need devices that can insist on a specific reality. Correct, Caretaker said. The first wave understood this eventually, but too late. They built these weapons in the final years, but they no longer had the right kind of minds to use them effectively. That is why baseline humanity was so carefully preserved. Your minds have not evolved past the point of absolute stubborn conviction. You can believe in something so strongly that reality itself bends to accommodate that belief. Borak clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. This seems more like religion than science. The line between them blurs when dealing with entities that exist outside normal physics, Caretaker replied. The silence cannot be fought with conventional weapons because it does not exist in conventional space. It must be fought with weapons that operate on principles of consciousness and determination. A sudden alarm echoed through the chamber. Red lights began flashing along the walls. Caretaker's holographic form flickered with distress. What's happening? Do-hyun demanded. Coalition ships are detecting spatial anomalies at the galactic rim. The silence is beginning to move. My analysis suggests it detected the vault activation signal. It is coming to investigate. The crew exchanged horrified looks. They had known this was possible, but hearing it confirmed made the danger terribly real. How long do we have? Do-hyun asked. Difficult to calculate. The silence moves through dimensions we cannot fully observe. Best estimate is between 4 and 6 days before it reaches the first coalition worlds. After that, the spread will be exponential. Mireille grabbed Do-hyun's arm. We need to contact the coalition immediately. They need to evacuate, prepare defenses, something. Defenses will not work, Caretaker interrupted. Conventional military action will only delay the silence by hours at best. The only effective response is to deploy the vault weapons and wake the preserved humans to operate them. Wake hundreds of thousands of people who went to sleep 10,000 years ago and tell them they need to immediately fight an impossible enemy? Hyejin's voice rose with stress. They'll need time to adjust, to understand what's happened. We can't just wake them and throw them into battle. The preserved humans are not unprepared, Caretaker said. Each was selected and trained specifically for this scenario. They have genetic memory implants that will activate upon waking. They will remember their purpose and training within hours of revival. This was planned, anticipated, prepared for. Do-hyun made a decision. Wake the military personnel first. We need people who can use these weapons immediately. How fast can the revival process work? Each pod takes approximately 6 hours to safely revive its occupant. I can begin simultaneous revival of up to 10,000 pods. That means in 6 hours we can have 10,000 trained soldiers awake and ready. Do it, Do-hyun ordered. Start with anyone trained in combat or weapons operation, and send a message to the Eternal Reach. Tell them to relay everything we've learned to Coalition Command. They need to know what's coming. Caretaker's projection flickered with what might have been approval, initiating revival sequence. Be advised, the first to wake will likely be disoriented despite their training. They went to sleep in one world and will wake in another. Handle them carefully. The crew rushed back to the stasis chamber. Already thousands of pods had begun glowing brighter. Do-hyun could see movement inside some of them as the occupants began to stir. I need to go back to the ship, Borak said suddenly. The Coalition needs detailed technical data on these weapons, and someone needs to coordinate the defense of the other vaults. If 144 locations are all activating, they'll all be vulnerable. Go, Do-hyun agreed. Take Jinwoo with you. His engineering expertise will help them understand the weapons. Mireille, Hyejin, you're with me. We need to be here when the first people wake up. Borak and Jinwoo hurried back toward the surface. Do-hyun, Mireille, and Hyejin moved to the nearest pods that showed the most activity. Inside one, a man's eyes opened for the first time in 10,000 years. The pod hissed as it unsealed. The man inside gasped, drawing breath into lungs that had been still for millennia. He blinked, looked around in confusion, then his eyes focused on Do-hyun with sudden, terrible clarity. He spoke in Korean, his voice rough from disuse. "How long?" 10,000 years, Do-hyun replied in the same language. The collapse succeeded. "You survived. But the silence is returning." The man sat up slowly, his movements becoming steadier as genetic memory kicked in. "My name is Suho, Commander Suho of the Last Defense Initiative. I was placed in stasis with Tactical Command Authority." He looked around at the other waking pods. "How many vaults activated?" "All of them. 144 vaults, all waking simultaneously." Suho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. The confusion was gone, replaced by focused determination. "Then we're not refugees. We're an army. The first wave planned for this. They knew the silence might return. That's why they preserved us with our training, our knowledge, our weapons." More pods were opening now. Men and women emerged, each going through the same rapid transition from confusion to clarity as their genetic memories activated. They spoke to each other in low voices, comparing notes, establishing chain of command. Hyejin watched in amazement. "They're adapting so fast. I've never seen anything like it." "They're not normal humans," Mireille reminded her. "They were designed for this exact situation. They're waking up and immediately falling into military formations." Look, she was right. The chamber was filling with people organizing themselves into groups. Suho had taken charge, his voice carrying authority as he directed people to different stations. Within minutes, what had been chaos became order. Suho turned back to Do-hyun. "You're the one who opened the vault?" "Yes. Captain Do-hyun of the Coalition Exploration Service." "Then you're in command of the Coalition forces." "I'm in command of the Vault forces. We need to coordinate immediately." Suho's expression was grim. "The silence will hit the outer colonies first, testing our response. It will learn from each encounter, adapting its approach. We need to deploy causality anchors to the most vulnerable worlds and establish memory forge stations at key locations." "How many vaults are online?" "All of them are activating. We don't know how many have fully woken yet." "Then we send the signal now. Emergency Priority Alpha. That will tell all vault commanders to accelerate their wake cycles and begin deployment." Suho looked at the ceiling, as if he could see through the mountain to the stars beyond. "The first wave sacrificed everything to give us this chance. We destroyed our civilization, slept for 10,000 years, and now we wake to fight. We will not fail them." Around them, thousands more pods opened, and an army that had slept since the dawn of recorded history began to wake. The stars shifted as the Eternal Reach dropped out of hyperspace. Captain Do-hyun stood on the bridge, watching the view screen display a planet that should not exist. His fingers drummed against the command console as he studied the barren world before them. "This is impossible," said Borak, the ship's navigation officer. His 6 limbs clicked against his station nervously. "This planet was destroyed 10,000 years ago. Every record says so." Do-hyun nodded slowly. The planet looked dead. Its surface was covered in gray ash that had turned to crystal over countless centuries. Massive structures jutted from the ground like broken bones, half buried and forgotten. The atmosphere glowed with a sickly yellow color, poisonous to most known life forms. "And yet here it is," Do-hyun replied. He turned to look at his crew. They were a mixed group from different species across the Galactic Coalition. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few, like himself, were human. "Mireille, what do your sensors show?" Mireille looked up from her console. She was young for a xenoarchaeologist, but her expertise on the precursors was unmatched in the Coalition. Her dark eyes reflected the screen's glow as she studied the readings. "There's a power signature," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Deep underground. It's faint but steady. Captain, this matches precursor technology perfectly." A ripple of whispers moved through the bridge crew. The precursors were a mystery that had haunted the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had built wonders beyond imagination, technology that even now the Coalition could barely understand. Then they had vanished overnight during an event called the Great Collapse. Entire sectors of space had been destroyed. Thousands of worlds had died. No one knew why or how it happened. "How deep?" Do-hyun asked. 3 kilometers beneath the surface, Mireille answered. "Inside a mountain range near the equator." Do-hyun considered the options. The planet was listed as a dead world, forbidden for approach. The radiation levels were dangerous. Every scan showed catastrophic damage from multiple extinction events. But that power signature meant something had survived down there, working steadily for 10,000 years. "We're going down," he decided. Borok's antennae twitched with concern. "Captain, the regulations state that dead worlds from the collapse era should not be approached without coalition approval." "We have approval for precursor investigation," Do-hyun said firmly. "This falls under our mission parameters. Prepare the landing team." 2 hours later, Do-hyun led a group of 6 crew members down to the planet's surface. They wore heavy environmental suits that protected them from the toxic atmosphere and radiation. The shuttle landed on a flat area of crystallized ash that crunched under their boots as they walked. The landscape was haunting. Ruins stretched in every direction. Buildings that had once reached toward the sky now lay shattered. Some structures were melted, others were simply cracked and broken. Everything was covered in the same gray crystal ash. "What happened here?" whispered Hyejin, the ship's medical officer. She was also human, and her voice sounded small in the vast emptiness. "War," said Jinwoo, the engineer. He pointed to blast patterns on nearby ruins. "Or something worse than war. Multiple impacts all at once. This wasn't an accident." They followed the power signature for an hour, hiking through the dead city and up into the mountains. The readings grew stronger with each step. Finally, they came around a rocky outcrop and stopped. Before them stood a door. It was massive, at least 50 meters tall and 30 meters wide. The door was set directly into the mountain face, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Despite 10,000 years of exposure, it showed no signs of damage or wear. The metal was perfect, unmarked, as if it had been placed there yesterday. "Incredible," Mirai breathed. She rushed forward, her scanner active. "This is definitely precursor work. Look at the precision. The molecular structure is flawless." Do-hyun approached the door carefully. His suit lights illuminated strange symbols carved around the door's frame. They were written in languages he recognized from his studies of ancient civilizations. "Can you read these?" he asked Mirai. She moved closer, her scanner recording everything. "Yes, some of them anyway. This one is in Old Vexian. It says sealed by final authority. This one is in Proto-Scaran. It says do not open, they're all warnings, Captain. 17 different languages all saying the same thing. This door was meant to stay closed." Borok had already extended a connector cable from his suit to an access panel beside the door. "I'm attempting to interface with the locking mechanism," he said. His voice carried the clicking undertones of his species. "The technology is remarkably preserved." They watched as Borok worked. Minutes turned into an hour. The insectoid officer tried every known method to open the door. He used quantum keys that could unlock any modern security system. He attempted biosignature scans. He even tried temporal codes that worked on other precursor sites they had investigated. Nothing happened. The door remained sealed and silent. "I don't understand," Borok said finally, frustration evident in his clicking. "The door is receiving power. The systems are active. But it's not responding to any standard protocol. It's as if the door is waiting for something specific." Mirai knelt beside the access panel, studying it closely. She noticed something that made her pause. Unlike other precursor technology they had found, this panel had small openings arranged in a pattern. She ran her gloved finger near them carefully. "These are acoustic sensors," she said quietly. "The door is listening." "Listening for what?" Do-hyun asked. "A sound? A specific sound or voice pattern, maybe?" Mirai stood up and looked at the massive door. The precursors might have used vocal commands for security. It would be nearly impossible to fake without the exact biological voice pattern. For the next hour, they tried everything they could think of. Borok played recordings of reconstructed precursor phonetics based on linguistic studies. Hyejin tried various frequency combinations. Jinwoo attempted to override the system with electromagnetic pulses. The door remained closed. Do-hyun felt frustration building. They were so close to potentially the greatest precursor discovery in decades, and they couldn't get past a simple door. He looked at the warnings carved around the frame again. All those different languages, all saying to stay away. Mirai stood before the access panel reading one of the warning texts aloud to herself. Without thinking, she translated it into her native language, speaking in Korean. "Only by human voice shall the last judgment be undone." The door hummed. Everyone froze. The sound was deep and resonant, vibrating through their suits and into their bones. Lights appeared along the door's edge, glowing with a soft blue color. The access panel erupted with holographic displays showing text in languages both familiar and strange. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life after 10,000 years of silence. Dust fell from the door's edges as massive bolts withdrew. The ground trembled beneath their feet. A voice spoke, clear and perfect, in Korean. Voice pattern recognized. Genetic markers confirmed. Welcome home, inheritor. The door began to open.